Hi, everybody. I'm Sandra Stanley, and welcome to our study, Comparison Trap. I don't know about you, but I constantly find myself drifting in the direction of comparison. It's almost as natural as breathing. You know where it started for me? Elementary school. At some point, around maybe the second grade, I started looking around and realizing that there's a right way to dress and a wrong way to dress. I found out that I was a little smarter than some people and not as smart as others. It was here that someone called me bird legs, and I spent the next 10 years comparing my legs to everybody else's. I started taking my cues from the people around me, and guess what? I didn't outgrow it. The thing I was comparing might have changed, but the tendency to look around and compare definitely hasn't. Every single day, I'm tempted to glance to the left and glance to the right and see how I'm doing, how I'm measuring up as compared to everybody else. As women, we have a hard time with this, don't we? We're not only tempted to compare ourselves to other women, but we compare our boyfriends or spouses to other women's boyfriends or spouses. For those of us with kids, we even compare our kids to other kids in their classrooms or on their teams. Those of us who regularly check in with social media, we tend to struggle with comparing the reality of our day-to-day lives with the highlight reels of our friends and acquaintances. Social media makes us think that everybody else has it all together, so we start comparing. We compare our pictures, we compare our travels, we even compare our clever comments and posts. All of this comparison is exhausting. It's frustrating. It puts us on a merry-go-round of comparison that doesn't seem to stop. And as we'll discover, it leads us to some dangerous places. But there are steps that we can take to get off that merry-go-round, and we can start tomorrow. I've written a daily challenge for you, and this daily devotional will have practical steps that you can take or a question to think about. It'll point us back to Scripture, the most effective tool I've found against the trap of constant comparison. During our time together, you'll hear a little bit from me and a little bit from Andy. We're really hoping that this study will help you refocus on the fact that God has uniquely gifted you and provided everything you need to accomplish His perfect plan for your life. We'll discover that rather than comparing ourselves to each other, we can rest in who we are and we can celebrate those around us.
Well, as Sandra said, this really is an issue or a subject or a tension that is, I think, more of a lady's issue than a man's issue. I really do think that. And the reason I think that, as I was listening and thinking back, and I can't speak for all men, but just for myself, I have never once compared myself to another woman. No, I really do think this is really more of a woman's issue than a man's issue. And even though I'm speaking and I'm going to bring the content, this really is more of a lady's issue, because as men, we really don't compare ourselves to other men, except maybe when it comes to cars and houses, boats, how our wives look, how smart our kids are, and how well they perform on the athletic field, and pretty much just about everything else. So this really is a universal thing. This isn't just a ladies thing. This isn't just a guy thing. This is just a thing. Now, I want to start off by being as transparent as I possibly can, and this is embarrassing. I coached a lot of baseball for my sons. We have 2 sons and a daughter. My daughter's our youngest of the 3. I'll tell you a little bit more about her later on. But when I coached baseball, I had a terrible internal habit I've never confessed, I've never spoken about, and I'm not even sure I would share this with a group of men, but I was the coach, and my sons were really good baseball players, but they were rarely the best player on the team. And so my ugly confession, and this is just so ugly, but this whole subject of comparison is so ugly. My ugly comparison was simply this: there were times that when one of my sons would strike out, that when one of the other players on the team, on our team, we're trying to win games, when another player on our team who was considered a better player than one of my sons, when one of them would strike out, I would be secretly, what? Happy. I mean, how ugly is that, right? But that's the problem with comparison. We find it driving wedges within relationships, and we find that within our hearts and our souls, there's this ugly, ugly, ugly thing. But the reason it's universal is because all of us, every single one of us, lives in what we call the land of Ur. Do you know what the land of Ur is? We look around and here's what we see. There are people who are richer, skinnier, smarter, taller, prettier, happier, hipper, and if you're single, married-er, right? And the problem is everywhere we look, there's somebody with more and if it's not the people around us that have more it's their spouse or their kids. Their kids are taller, or their kids are more athletic, or their kids are, are making better grades, or their husband has a better job than our husband. So everywhere we look, there's an but that's only half the problem. Because then we look around and there are people who are, there you look around and there's some women who are a little bit heavier than you. And there's some women who are a little shorter than you. And there's some women who are singler than you, and they're less happily married-er than you. And then you feel superior, which is another problem altogether, right? So at the end of the day, here's what we've concluded, and here's the theme of our entire time together and the theme of our entire study. And it's simply this. There really is, either way you go, either way you look, everywhere you look, there is absolutely no win in comparison. I'd like for all of us just to say this out loud a couple of times. Ready? There's no win. Everybody at home as well. One more time. There's no win in comparison. Now, we call this series the comparison trap because it's not just a curious thing and it's not just a cute thing, but it really is a trap. In fact, some of you have debt right now, and the reason you have financial debt is because you spent too long staring at somebody else's lifestyle. And you stared at their lifestyle long enough to where you decided, I've got to have me one of those, and I've got to wear me one of those, and I've got to have a couple of those, and I need to drive one of those. And next thing you know, you have debt, and you wonder, where did this financial debt come? It's part of the comparison trap. Some of you are dieting yourself to death because you are trying to look like someone you will never, ever look like. And it drives you crazy. And instead of being comfortable with the body that God has given you, you are absolutely consumed with the fact that you are going to look like someone else, and you're hurting yourself. Some of you are dating yourself to death. You are so sick of being in other people's weddings, which is understandable. You are so desirous of a great thing to be in a relationship and to be married. But because you're comparing yourself to other women and other people, you're beginning to lower your standards, both morally and perhaps the guys that you're interested in. And then there's something that we can all relate to. Because of this whole comparison trap thing, because of this whole living in the land of Ur, most of us are driving somebody absolutely crazy. You're driving your kids crazy. And I know what you say, because I'm a parent, I get this. You say, well, honey, you're looking at one of your son or your daughter, and their grades aren't what you think they should be, and you're saying, honey, I just want you to reach your full potential. But the truth is, you want one of your kids to reach the full potential of your neighbor's kids, or your mother, your sister-in-law's kids, or your brother's kids. And we end up comparing our kids to other kids, and we drive our kids crazy. We drive our spouse crazy in terms of how much money perhaps they make, or how ambitious they are, or why can't they sort of get with it, and you sort of feel your engines churning, and you have to be careful what you say, and if you say too much, it's going to push them away, and yet there's that thing inside of us because we live in the land of Ur. And possibly you're driving yourself crazy, financially, professionally, whatever it might be, because somewhere along the way, you got a picture of what your life and your lifestyle should look like. Somewhere along the way, somebody planted in your mind or heart a picture of what you should be and who you should be or how you should turn out, and you aren't there yet, and it's driving you crazy. And then every time you open Pinterest, you're reminded of all the things you don't have yet and you never, ever will have. And once again, it brings us back to this unavoidable reality. Let's say it together, that there's no win in comparison. There's absolutely no win. Now, we're not the first person to discover that. We're not the first group of people to realize that this is an unavoidable reality. The wisest man that ever lived, according to what the scripture teaches us, Solomon, actually had something very, very specific to say about this. In fact, he gives us an extraordinary insight into the idea that this really is a no-win proposition, regardless of which way you go. Here's what Solomon wrote in the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes. He said this, "And I saw," and this is a pretty extreme statement, "and I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another." Think about that. He said, "I looked around as the king and I saw some very ambitious people, some very successful people, poor people, middle class people that didn't really have middle class in ancient times, rich people." He said, "As I examined everybody's work and everybody's work ethic, as I saw all the ants scurrying around doing all the things that they did, I realized that they're basically looking to the left and the right, and they're all trying to keep up with each other, and basically that all toil and all achievement spring from this little word, the word envy." In other words, if I could sort of restate what he said, here's what he's saying. I saw people determining where they were based on where everyone else was. I determined that everybody else was determining where they were based on where everyone else around them was. And then he gives us a word picture that we can all relate to. And he introduces us to a phrase that I hope you won't forget for the rest of your life every time you are tempted like I am. So look to the left and to look to the right. Here's what he says about that idea. "This too is meaningless. It is chasing after the wind. It's endless. It's futile. There's no finish line. There's always somebody than you." And Solomon isn't arguing for apathy. Solomon isn't arguing that none of us should have ambition. Solomon isn't arguing that we shouldn't set goals and accomplish things. What he's saying is that when we allow the pace of other people and when we allow the lifestyle of other people to drive us past what we're equipped for, what we're called to, we find ourselves in a trap. We are chasing after the wind. But he's not arguing for apathy, because in the next phrase he says this. He says, "Fools, only a fool would fold their hands and ruin themselves." He says, I'm not saying you shouldn't work. I'm not saying you shouldn't be ambitious as it relates to motivating your kids and inspiring your kids to be great. I'm not saying you shouldn't maximize your potential. I'm not saying you shouldn't be all that you can be. Only a fool would simply check out of life and fold their hands and just see where life takes them. Which leaves us with this question, which leaves us wondering, is there a third option? I mean, if chasing after the wind, this endless pursuit of more and better and thinner and richer and faster, and if that's just chasing after the wind, but at the same time, I can't simply give up on life and check out of life, is there a third option? And in this amazing book, the book of Ecclesiastes, this book full of wisdom, he gives us the better option. And he gives us another word picture. And here's what Solomon says. This is so powerful. He says, "Better one handful with tranquility. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind." Better one handful with tranquility. Do you know what tranquility is? And I'm going to ask you to participate with me with this definition. Here's what tranquility is. Tranquility is three things. It's satisfaction, contentment, and peace. Now, to illustrate this, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Everybody in the room and everybody watching. I want us to say these three words together, but I want us to take a deep breath in, and as we exhale, I want us to say the word satisfaction. Then we're going to take a deep breath in, we're going to exhale and say the word contentment. We're going to breathe in, and we're going to exhale and say the word peace. And for just a moment collectively, we are going to experience just a taste of tranquility. Because even these words bring with it a sense of what Solomon is talking about when he says there is a way, and this is why we're doing this series together. There is a way to live your life without chasing the wind, but at the same time becoming everything God has called you and equipped you to be. So you ready? Here we go. We're going to breathe in, and then we're going to say the word satisfaction. Everybody ready? Here we go. Satisfaction. Breathe in. And our last one. Peace. Isn't that powerful? Wouldn't it be great to live that way. The language in this verse gives us another idea. It's as if he's saying, you know what? One hand open, living with one hand open is far better than living with both fists clenched, trying to hold on to something we're not sure we're ever going to be able to hold on to. Solomon is saying it is much better to live with one hand open. You know what one hand open represents? It represents God's opportunity to place things in our hands and God's opportunity to take things away. He gives and takes away. We sing that song. He gives and takes away. And Solomon is saying that it is far better to live with one handful, than two hands that are trying to hold on to things that we can't control. This represents stress. This represents striving. This represents contentment and peace and tranquility. So here's what I want us to do. I know some of you have things on your lap, some of you are drinking coffee at home. If you would, for just a minute, you can leave the things on your lap. I'd like you to put your hands on your lap like this, and I'd like you to turn one hand over. So you have one hand out like this and one hand over. It's a little bit awkward, okay? And here's what I want you to think about. It is better to live with one handful with tranquility, to have one hand full of tranquility. Now I want you to turn your other hand over and I want you to clench your fist, than to live like this. Again, Solomon says this is better than this. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. So between now and session number 2, here's what I want you to think about. The next time you're sitting somewhere, the next time you're driving somewhere, the next time one of your kids runs in, the next time you begin daydreaming about where your husband should be and how are you subtly going to communicate with him how he should be and how he should act, the next time you're with your boyfriend and you're wondering, is he ever going to act? And the next time you find yourself going there, here's what I want you to do. Physically, I want you to think about those 3 words, but then I want you to decide. I want you to ball up your fist and remember, you know what? This is no way to live. This is better. This is no way to live. This is better. Can you imagine living like that? Can you imagine no longer using another person as a reference point to determine who you are or where you should be or where your children should be? Wouldn't it be great to stop, to use Solomon's word, wouldn't it be great to stop chasing the wind? Is that even possible? And the answer is yes. That's what it means to escape the comparison trap.
So it seems like Solomon has our number. Our constant comparing drives us to perpetual striving, exhaustion, and days that are void of the peace God offers. It's frustrating. It has no end. It's a trap. And it can be such an ugly trap. We all have that little thing in us that Andy referred to that would secretly like to see someone else fail. Not completely implode or get deathly ill or anything like that. Maybe just a little stumble so that we can feel better about ourselves. Maybe we want to see a skinny friend start battling weight gain. Or maybe it would be nice for once for a roommate to struggle in her dating relationship. Or maybe we'd like to witness someone who always seems to win at work be passed over for a promotion. How ugly is that? I don't want that to be true of me. All of this is exhausting, and it's a thief of our peace. Solomon says that all this striving and comparing and hoping others fail that started right here in our early years is meaningless. It accomplishes nothing. Think of what good we could do with that time, energy, and emotion if we used it to celebrate others rather than compare. So for you, what are the areas in which you're currently being tripped up by looking to the left, looking to the right, trying to run that marathon of comparison? Are you exhausted from trying to keep up with the people around you? Do you sometimes wish you weren't even aware of what they were doing or where they were traveling or what they have? Awareness really does drive our discontentment, and awareness isn't going away. Are you blowing the budget each month in an effort to keep up appearances? We're just chasing after the wind, Solomon says. There will always be someone with bigger and better, whatever the category. Hey moms, are you allowing your kids to be who God created them to be? Or are you driving them crazy by pushing them to be better versions of the kids around them? Did you know there are couples who would love to have a child like your son or daughter, and they can't? If you're married, is it possible your husband feels like you're dissatisfied with him because you compare him to other more successful men? We're smart enough not to just outright say Tom makes more money or the Joneses' vacations make ours look lame. But are we subtly saying things that erode these most important earthly relationships? All of these scenarios are more dangerous than we want to admit. Did you know that when we do this, we're not encouraging the people we love to be better? We're manipulating them to do or be something that makes us look better. Ladies, we're skilled at masking manipulation as encouragement, aren't we? We need to get off this merry-go-round of comparison. Think about this. What are the areas where you find yourself stumbling? Are you chasing after the wind? Take a few minutes for an honest look. And remember, there is a better way. There's a place of peace that far exceeds the trap of comparison.